Can everybody hear me? Great. Good morning. Thank you all for coming out, everyone in the audience and everybody on Zoom to hear our presentations. I'm Phyllis. I'm an archaeologist and postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Anthropology here at the university. And today my talk is going to move away from traditional gravitations towards the sexy Maya archaeology artifacts. So the grand architecture, the royal tombs, the grand palaces, and discuss how even the tiniest artifacts can reveal really significant information about ancient Maya economies, social structure, and in particular, the agency of so-called Maya commoners, or the regular everyday people that made up 95% or more of classic Maya society. Okay, so the classic Maya, they were really thriving from between about 600 and 800 AD. This is kind of the height of Maya society. And during that time, obsidian, which you see here in the pictures, was a really hot commodity all over the Maya region throughout Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. Because this material is basically volcanic glass, it breaks very easily and can be shaped into multiple different tools and has extremely sharp edges for cutting. Because this resource only outcrops in, in a few regions of Guatemala in the highlands, really close to modern day Guatemala City, it had to travel hundreds of kilometers to make it to most of the sites throughout the Maya region. So because of this, archaeologists have traditionally believed that the elites probably had really tight control over obsidian, and that common people, they took what they could get and didn't really have much say in how that was dispersed, how it was manufactured, how it was used. So the classic Maya site of Tamarindito is starting to challenge some of these long-held assumptions about classic Maya economies and the control of obsidian in particular. So Tamarindito is a site in Guatemala that was really at the height of power between about 600 and 762 AD. So during this time, they were in control of a lot of the smaller sites around the area. So you see Tamarindito here. So here we see an elevation map that shows the two royal plazas at the height of elevation. So this is where the royal family and elites would have lived. And then all these green dots here to the southwest represent commoner households. And so if we look here, way on the outskirts of the site, over a mile from the royal center, we have what we call Group 5 PSD, which at first glance is just a regular, inconspicuous, non-elite household. But what makes this site really interesting, what makes this household really interesting is that over 75% of all the obsidian that has ever been found at Tamarindito over the last 11, 12 years was found in one building in this household group. So having found this kind of led me to my research questions, which are who was really involved in the production of these obsidian tools? Was it the elites that had control, or were the common people that were living in this household, did they have more of an influence over what happened with obsidian? And then what can these production strategies tell us about social structure and economic status at the site? So here we have a plan view of household group 5 PSD. And we know from how far it is away from the royal palace, the relatively small size of the group compared to other groups at the site, that this was probably a pretty low status household. But as I said before, over 75% of all the obsidian was found here. So what's going on? What makes this even more interesting and more exciting is that all of this obsidian, well, almost all of it, was found, in this room in particular at the site. So this structure is really unique in its architecture, in that you can only access this back room by going outside of the group and going in from the north. So you can see all three other structures, they're accessible from this central plaza, and you probably would have been able to see at least a little bit inside of each structure from the other buildings, but not this one. You could only get this room from the back. So that kind of suggests that there was something private happening here that not everybody in the group was privy to. So just because we found all these stone tools in this room, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they were made. Stone tools are very transportable. They were traded, they were sold. They didn't usually stay where they were made. So the way that we can figure out if these tools were actually made here and if the residents of this group were in control of that production in any way is to look at microdebitage, which are the tiniest, nope, wrong button. The tiniest bits of stone that fly off when stone tools are made. So these little bitty pieces of stone that are usually less than about 6 millimeters, they get embedded into the floors of houses through stomping and cleaning, and usually get stuck and stay relatively close to the area that they were first embedded into the modern day. And so what I did is I took 65 soil samples from this residential group and analyzed them to find the microdebitage that was possibly analyze them to see if microdebitage was in them, to see if these tools were made here. And what I found are two hotspots. One here in that northern annex where all the obsidian was found. So that's very exciting. And another one here in this open structure to the west. And this would have been visible very easily from the plaza. And how I interpret this is that the microdebitage that was found in the northern annex is probably the result of ritualized production of some sort that other members of the group were not allowed to see, not allowed to participate in. This would have been only a select group that could go in here. Whereas production that was happening here was probably domestic in nature and didn't need to be hidden. So there are a few other clues to this room being used for ritual production. Excavations show that that northern annex was actually designed that way. So from the very beginning, the residents of this group designed this building so that only people could only enter from the north, which means that they probably had ritual production in mind. And then also the location of group 5 PSD to its closest neighbors is far enough away that they also would not have been able to hear or see any activities happening in that room without coming very close. And then finally, excavations reveal that this structure in particular was ritually terminated. So what that means is that it was intentionally demolished and taken apart and then burned when the residents were done living there or at the end of occupation of the site. So what does this tell us about socioeconomic status and production at Tamariндito? So the structure of 5 PSD or 5 PS12 was probably built with ritual production in mind. And then we have the obsidian tools themselves and the microdebitage to show us that the structure was used, at least this northern annex, was used to actually make those tools. So at least some of the tools that were found there were probably made there as well. And then finally, the structure was ritually terminated, which means that they destroyed it at the end on purpose. So what this tells me, and something that's common throughout the Maya region, but is more common with elites, is that the structure and probably the tools and those who are producing them were imbued with the technical and ritual knowledge necessary to make these tools. So there was some sort of power that was given to these objects and people. And that by destroying the structure itself, they ritually killed that power so that squatters and other people couldn't come in afterwards and steal that knowledge. So what does this tell us about our research questions? Well, it probably means that the elites did not have tight control over obsidian. That doesn't mean that they weren't involved, but this structure being so far from the royal palace and having this kind of secret room that wasn't access to everybody, where it shows 80% or revealed 80% of the obsidian from the site, that tells me that these residents had a lot more agency and control over this production than what we normally see at Maya sites. How they were able to access that power, we're not really sure. But what I can say is that they were able to kind of build a stronger socioeconomic status for themselves, which is really important in archaeology when we tend to focus more on the elites and the powerful things they're doing and kind of ignoring these people and the kind of power they had. So just to end, the importance of looking at tiny, what you might think are inconspicuous artifacts, is that they can reveal really important information about people that were marginalized in ancient times and whom the study of has kind of been marginalized in modern times as well. Thank you very much.